What's going on, you guys? It's your Huggable Hipster here, and welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another episode of Soulsborne Academy. Don't mind the hunter in the corner, they're just here for your protection. Today's Soulsborne Academy / psychologically gaming episode is going to be on the Sisters of Dark, aka the Fragments of Manus. For a while, I've had this kind of lingering thought in the back of my head about doing a video on the Sisters of Dark. The Fragments of Manus is probably one of the most intriguing lore points of Dark Souls 2. These four sisters are the Fragments of Manus, taken on this human or other worldly type forms, because we see Nishandra in Dark Souls 2 as the final boss battle. We see all these different other characters in Dark Souls 2 that have kind of coalesced into their own version of their own like little Manus, if you will. So with the Fragments of Manus and his emotions, we have the following: Nishandra, who represents greed and desire; Alana, who represents anger and wrath; Nadalia represents loneliness; and Alsana represents fear and sorrow. These are all the emotions and all of the life perspectives, I want to say, that Manus must have acquired through his time just existing. We see references to Manus in Elden Ring. We see references to Manus throughout the entire world of Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3. Why? Because Manus is quintessential evil. He is a part of the world. He's the evil that balances out the good within the world of Dark Souls. Now, Nishandra representation of greed and desire, we see how that turned out at the very end of the game. We see her final boss battle, which Nishandra's boss battle is absolutely incredible. For those of you who have not played Dark Souls 2, please play it. It's absolutely an incredible game with, you know, a few things to be desired, but that's besides the point. There's just so much within the lore of Dark Souls 2 that gets looked over because of the weird control work that was done and a few really kind of odd choices that were made. I wish people really took more time to look at Dark Souls 2, because the lore and the way that this led from Dark Souls 1 is just absolutely brilliant, but I digress. We have greed, desire, anger, wrath, loneliness, fear, and sorrow, all of the emotions of depression. Psychologically, Manus is the embodiment of depression. He is the embodiment of what it is to be depressed, to feel like there is nothing left. Manus is a fascinating character psychologically, because when we go up against him as the player, even though you have a little bit of a way to treat him, which is what I did when I first went at him, not gonna lie, it is fascinating because when you go against Manus and you see him for the first time, he is this beast that has this humongous hand that is just outreaching to the player constantly. It's reaching towards the player, with Manus's hands constantly reaching out to the player, reaching out like it's almost as if it's trying to lull the player into that same universe that it lulled Artorias into. So when we look at the concept of depression and we look at how how grasping depression is, and then we see Artorias, the character. We see so many of the characters in Olisile. You know, we see so many different creatures in that world just succumb and just be angry and just be in their own world existing, not having empathy, not caring about other people, just completely subdued in this darkness. We see that that is actually a manifestation of depression. And in the same vein that the Sisters of Dark are pieces of Manus, Millicent is also a piece of Melania. Millicent and her sisters are direct children of Melania. They are a part of her. You see how all of these ideas and all of these concepts get reutilized, but in a different fashion in the world of Dark Souls and Elden Ring? Pretty cool, right? It's so sad because if you betray Millicent, she turns into that flower of rot the same way Melania did. And what do fungi, the plural of fungus. What do they do? A fungus spreads, much like Manus depression spreads, unfortunately. And this is why I always held this thought that Dark Souls is kind of the battle between the self and what you are experiencing, if that makes sense. Why do you think it's called Dark Souls? I mean, my theory has always been that we are fighting the Dark Soul. We are fighting this ever-present kind of mental state that is haunting us to a degree. You know, we're fighting Manus. We're fighting all of these different boss battles, Smo, Ornstein, Artorias. We're fighting all of the different different emotions, all of the different ways in which things can haunt us. Now, the really interesting thing about Manus is that he wasn't always how we see him as this big, just ginormous creature of depression and darkness and evil. It states here in the lore that Manus was a primordial human who possessed an extraordinary soul consisting of a viscous, lukewarm lump of gentle humanity. An immense dark soul. He was also a sorcerer who used a rough and old wooden catalyst, very crude but large enough to be used as a weapon. His sorceries in particular were dark and in fact manipulated the dark soul, even managing to give it a will and throw it at enemies to chase them, which is what we see whenever we head into that cavern area that we confront Manus in. We see all these little dark souls that are just trying to attack us. Manus also possessed one half of an ancient stone pendant infused with powerful dark magic that was infinitely precious to him and represented a source of wretched nostalgia and lost joy of a past loved one. At some point in the distant past, Manus died and his body was buried in the caves of the region upon which the civilization of Olasile would later arise. Now, what I really found interesting in his lore, and stick with me when I have this train of thought, because this is going to, I love this so much. Like, this lore is just chef's kiss. The primordial serpent Koth arrived in Olasile and manipulated the country to upturn the grave of the primordial man buried beneath the dungeons of their city and resurrect him. Hold on. Koth was looking for a Dark Lord, looking for a vessel to become the next Dark Lord. The royal family in Olasile took the precious broken pendant from Manus themselves to giving it to Princess Dusk. Manus kidnaps her to take said pendant back. Stay with me. There's nostalgia connected to this pendant. There's memories. There's a sense of love. Even in Manus's corrupted state of darkness and depression, he still wants what is his, what is most meaningful to him. So, like I said, he kidnaps Princess Dusk to get his pendant back, which is rightfully his. This is where it gets interesting psychologically. His immense mass of humanity out of control led to the manifestation of an abyss that spread, threatening to devour an entire land. So his depression therefore spread, consuming everything and everyone. Depression, unfortunately, anger, upsetment, rage, those things can catch like fire, and they can be contagious, and they can spread to a lot of people. Unfortunately, it's really sad. Happiness is also contagious too. Happiness, joy, optimism, empathy, those are all contagious things too. But when we look at this in particular, of how sadness and destruction and just pure chaos spread psychologically, it's a very damaging thing. Because Manus's own rage and resentment and hatred and sadness just spread. And this is why Artorias went into that abyss. This is why we still see Artorias' humanity through his chaos. In the boss battle, when we go in and we see him for the first time, he's still fighting the creatures who have just been long gone. And then you see this kind of conflict. You see him scream. You see him then fight the player. And it is such a sad, it's my favorite boss battle in the entire game, but it's so incredibly sad. Because in that instance, you see a character fight depression. You see a character try to fight through the darkness, and the darkness overcomes him fully. We have then the chunks of his soul that go into his daughters. And what's really interesting is that it also says here in the lore that these new entities had some recollection of their father and the dark powers that he bestowed. And when the abyss that they called home was displaced, they scattered across the land to sustain themselves and seek more and more power. They reached Dragonelic, where in one way or another they came into contact with the holders of magnificent souls. Alana, Alsana, Nadalia, and Nishandra all have bits of their father, all bits of Manus within them. So no matter what they do, no matter what souls they consume, they're not going to be changing anything about themselves, because they're still bringing themselves with them, if that makes sense. So it's kind of, it's really interesting to see how the lore and how everything plays out with Manus being this crucial part of the story, not just in the Souls games but in Elden Ring as well. And all of these, these kind of stereotypical bad guy characters, they all want power, they all want control, they all want strength, they all want the thing that just to control whatever it is that is their surroundings, because they feel the lack of control and absence of control. Why do we see all of these different enemy characters in all the Souls games? Elden Ring, Bloodborne, Demon Souls, you name it. It doesn't even have to be a Souls or a Souls-like. It could be any game. Does every bad guy want control? And this could be an entire psychologically gaming video on its own. Why do all of these bad guys want control? They can't control anything else, so they control what is immediately around them. Manus is a fascinating character. If you guys want, I can cover him more. I can cover the Dark Sisters more in depth if you guys want me to as well. I can even do a live stream where we go in depth and we can discuss it. I really think that it's very interesting characters. The Dark Sisters are by far some of my favorite characters within Dark Souls 2. That's gonna do it for this episode of Soulsborne Academy / Psychologically Gaming. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys like my face and what I do, please be sure to subscribe and hit that bell down below. May you find your worth in the waking world, your hunter. Stay casually nerdy, and I'll see you all in the next video. Umbasa.